Hi there. Welcome back to Maryland Divorce in Custody, Celebrity Divorce Edition, Part 2. I'm here again with my good friend Melissa McDonald, and we're just going to get right into it. There's been a couple of major celebrity divorces since we last checked in with everybody, and I think Melissa's got a whole slew of questions. So, Melissa, how are you? Thanks for joining me again, and what's going on?
Well, thank you for having me. I had so much fun the last time, and I'm glad to be back to do this again.
Awesome.
And there has been a lot of news in the world of celebrity divorces. Kelly Clarkson, who I love, filed for divorce, which is a bummer. She seems like such a lovely person. Very low drama, so there's not a lot to talk about there, but there's a little bit, I guess. Dr. Dre is getting divorced,
Big one.
which is sort of a new one, but it's a potential for quite a bit of drama. And I just read this morning that Christina Ricci, who I also love and have stand for quite a long time, Christina Ricci got an emergency protective order against her husband and filed for divorce and is asking for sole legal and physical custody of their kid.
I did not know about Christina Ricci. That's like breaking news in my world.
That is a breaking news one.
Yeah. Okay.
But just sort of, yeah, but she got an emergency protective order, and the one article I read said that her husband spat on her during her, which, yeah, that was my reaction. And, she's really tiny, but if someone spat on me, I don't think it would be a matter of me getting a protective order against them. It would be a matter of them having to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
So that's pretty bad.
That's bad. I would just tend to think that if someone is spitting on somebody else, the emotions are super high, and then I would be very shocked if the only thing in that report was so-and-so spit on her. I mean, I think
that's a lot of contempt to spit on someone.
Yeah, you have to be pretty angry and be wanting to get the same anger back to spit on somebody. What I would guess is that that's a very headline grabbing thing to spit on somebody. There's probably the more common striking, pushing, shoving, holding against will, detaining, that type of thing in there as well. But spitting, I'm not sure if I've had a case that involved spitting. That is a very specific piece of anger right there. And it also tends me to think that the spitter, her husband, he probably has a bit of a temper, which might explain the request for sole custody of the children. But who knows? That's a wild one. That's unpleasant.
We might have to do another episode about that.
Okay, maybe we come back to that one. That's two breaking news for us today.
That's some breaking news. Kelly Clarkson filed. Kelly is very low drama. Even though she's out there doing a lot of stuff, she's very in the public eye. She has a talk show. She does The Voice show. She has a lot of albums. But she's not a big gossip target. I think that that's very intentional on her part. Now, what's interesting to me, and this is a question I have about your practice or what you've seen, is she actually specifically cited having a shelter in place with her spouse as being a factor in them getting divorced. So, I mean, and actually I read a little bit about it, and they were sheltering at their vacation property in Montana, which I would think, is probably a really big fancy house. But when I read about it, it's like a one-room cabin. So yeah. So I guess that's more, you're getting into more sort of regular people and what their circumstances might be when they're, during coronavirus. So have you seen sort of an uptick in people just being like, we're coming out of quarantine hot and we're heading right to the courthouse to bust this marriage up?
Yeah, when the COVID thing really started breaking, everyone, I think including you, sent me the meme of the guy in the yellow suit, divorce lawyers looking. But early on in March and April, our practice, I didn't see it at all. And in fact, I saw a slowdown, which I think reflected everyone's, or most of the general public's, kind of concern and the uncertainty around the virus and all of that, kind of with jobs shutting down very quickly, unemployment jumping. I think everyone was just kind of tentative and scared of the unknown. And I think that that's reasonable. In the past couple weeks, now that I think people have either grown accustomed to coronavirus or in some degrees just are over it and want to return back to normal, our calls are consults, or initial consults of people that want to explore kind of their options. they've really picked up. And so I think there's something to it. I think the high level of stress, the high levels of stress is what drives divorce. People want to think that it's infidelity because that's like the one that sticks out. But a lot of times it's just death by 1,000 cuts, financial pressure, sources of stress. And then that takes a toll on the relationship. And then the things that drew you into the relationship aren't there. And coronavirus and the response to it and locking down and quarantining and distancing, that's taking a toll on people. And, if your relationship was kind of dodgy or on the rocks or you were struggling, went that way. And even a strong relationship with like I think the fabric of it is more easily frayed when your routine is disrupted. Your finances might be disrupted. You could have bills stacking up because when two people have different philosophies on those things and these concerns are mounting, that can create a conflict that wasn't there before. I think that is happening, and I think if you're a family with two people working from home, and maybe you've got your child, or you've got more than one kid in the house, and they're running around like wild people, and you can't get your work done, and you're having trouble, and your spouse is feeling the same way, you can just see how quickly your safe space, your home, for some people it's a safe space, becomes another source of stress and tension, and that's really hard. I mean, it really wears on relationships. And what are we in? I'm looking at the date on my computer. We're almost 4 months into all of this, and it's just, it doesn't, on one hand, that's not a lot of time. On the other hand, it can feel like an eternity.
It does feel like an eternity. And I'm not even I think I'm not personally having any more than just sort of the normal run-of-the-mill things that I get irritated about. I haven't even felt like, but it still is just a long time.
Yeah. And the other thing is, if your marriage was on the rocks, like, for example, if your spouse has a drinking problem, and for whatever reason you could tolerate it before, this coronavirus, you might be like, I can't take it. That's it. It could be just, the phrase, the drop in the bucket. It could be, okay, these set of circumstances, I just can't take it. And I do think we're seeing some of that, although I don't have any statistics for you or any data to back it up. But I think there was a pause, and now I think I expect to have a very busy second half of 2020.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. That was an insightful answer, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And sort of things I wouldn't have thought about necessarily. I would just thought I was just thinking too much FaceTime with one person, you want to go crazy, but I think it's a lot deeper than that. Now, I do want to circle around to Dr. Dre getting divorced, because I think it's really interesting. Now, Dre has been married since 1996, so for a while. Yeah. His wife, Nicole Young, is a lawyer, so someone who has very much her own thing going on. They don't have a prenup, which is which is wild, because he was very well established in his music career by 1996. The Chronic came out in 92, 93, something like that. He'd already, NWA was already broken up by then, so he already was a very big name. And now.
And I'll say he's always been a savvy businessman. So he's,
Right. Right. He was, sorry, I didn't mean. So he was a producer, wasn't he producing Snoop Dogg back then? And he's had all this, the headphone thing that he sold, the Beats thing that he sold to Apple now for several billion dollars. But he is worth, I read, hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion. No prenup.
Oh yeah.
So now you really got the yellow jacket divorce lawyer guy,
Ooh, yeah, that guy, that's exactly whoever lines up Dr. Dre and his wife, that's them right now.
Well, she is represented, so good for her, well, Shakespeare very famously said that any lawyer, I think it was Shakespeare, said that any lawyer who represents himself has a fool for a client. And I think that's very true. But how about a lawyer who represents a lawyer? Do they have a good client, or do they have a very challenging client? And are lawyers good at getting divorced? Because I think I would be super good at getting divorced if I ever wanted to, which I don't. Sorry, if my husband is watching, I do not want to get divorced. But I do think I would be very, very good at it if the occasion arose, which hopefully I don't anticipate that it will. Am I wrong about
Okay, so
whether I would be good at it?
let me hit a couple of things there. One, I'm pretty sure California has, they're like, I think, a community property state, which is different than Maryland. Maryland, this would be, I think, quite a doozy in terms of the range of outcomes for how to split up Dr. Dre's empire, right? But I think in California that they have kind of a 10-10-10 rule for alimony. It's like, I think it's like just a straight 50-50 state. And I assume Dr. Dre, King of the West Coast, you know, he is still stationed, his residence is in California. So it may be a fairly kind of cut and dry process. Now, her filing, right? She filed. That, again, I think we talked about this with Jay and Kristen, that indicates that they don't have like an agreement in place already. And the fact that it's public, which I would expect two very sophisticated people like that, if they tried to negotiate, they could not. And this is filing is kind of the next step in escalation of their process. It'll be interesting to see kind of what his response is and all of that. But I would be very shocked if they haven't had extensive closed door meetings for a while on that, on their divorce prior to going public. Now, divorcing an attorney. I would say, in terms of like making kind of sweeping generalizations.
I love a sweeping generalization.
Engineers are the most difficult clients to deal with in a divorce.
Really?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Why?
I'll come back to it.
I would not have predicted that.
I'll come back to it. Then it's doctors and maybe like 2B attorneys. And I think the reason why is the traits that make people good at those particular jobs make them difficult clients, right? So an engineer, for example, if you have kind of like the classic engineer brain, I have been involved in cases where engineer type client like spreadsheets the whole case. And I don't mean finances. I have seen a spreadsheet and a graph about a sex life. So,
yeah.
Oh, I see. We have a very famous visitor back there. And it's like, when it comes to finances, you know, sometimes these very particular individuals, they want to look at like receipts from like 3 years ago, and they'll have like every Target expense that they made and like who it benefited, and they want to recoup half of the $37 they spent in 2017. And you just get lost in.
Davis, my husband, for people in the audience, is an engineer, and this is absolutely another reason why I can never get divorced, because he already has like extensive spreadsheets,
Yeah.
Financial spreadsheets.
Of course, I would expect nothing less from Dave. But like, you know, we're like in the arguments over $19.50. Mm-hmm. Just like, you're killing yourself. In terms of, you know, you're paying someone like me several $100s an hour to look through like your Target receipts from 3 years ago, which isn't going to go too far in court either. So switching gears to attorneys. Attorneys apply that same kind of attention to detail and type A-ness, the bad ones, the difficult attorneys, to what they're good at. And attorneys are good at over-negotiating, finding loopholes, you know, like
making novel arguments.
There you go. Has anyone ever argued this about dividing property? No, because it's silly.
Why can't we?
Right.
Let's take it to the Court of Appeal, Davis.
Exactly. That particular mentality, that like fighter's mentality, that like grab and hold on mentality, probably serves them very well in their practice. It makes their divorce awful, brutal, far more expensive than it needs to be. The results don't change too much. They're terrible. So I have an example from a case that I had years and years ago where I was on the other side of an attorney representing himself.
Oh no.
And this is all, he did all of this in public. This is a hearing on the record. So They had children, and he locked his wife, ex-wife, whatever their relationship was at the time, out of the house, and he had changed the locks. The kid.
I'm guessing you can't do that if you jointly own the house, right?
We don't even need to get into that. The child's, say, basketball uniform was in the house. My client gets in the house, gets the basketball uniform, whatever it was, and this attorney thinks in his mind, I swear to God, was like, gotcha, you committed breaking and entering, you're not worthy, you are not a fit parent, and argued that in a custody hearing.
First degree burglary.
That she was a lawbreaker, that she was a criminal. And you're like watching the magistrate's head kind of explode as they listen to this. But the lawyer's mind is, the 4 elements of burglary or whatever they are. She's hit them. She's lucky I haven't filed charges against her with the state's attorney, but she's a criminal and like not a good parent. And you're like, that's insane. That's not going to fly in my life.
To be fair to him, I have seen people who have gone to jail for stuff like that. So, the criminal justice system being what it is.
Well, different podcast, different
podcast.